Hello, parents. Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, we have a very special event for you guys, and we're going to be talking about a lot of topics that are so important for you as targeted parents. We're going to talk about, parenting time. We're going to talk about parent-child interaction, talking about parent-child relationship, the children emotional security, parent conflict and domestic violence, and how all of that's impacting the children. And hopefully that will also help you figure out how to improve your relationship with your children. And with us today, we have an amazing guest, and we're really honored to have Dr. Fabricius with us. He's a developmental psychologist from Arizona State University. Hello, Dr. Fabricius. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And
thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You guys, if you could please let us know if you could hear us okay and where you're calling in from. Again, I'm having problem finding where the comments are. Give me 1 second. I want to make sure I can see it. Yeah, I don't know why. I've been doing this for so long, and every time I have trouble seeing where the comments, like Facebook, like I used to be able to have no more trouble finding it, and recently something changed, and now every time I have to like move things around and try to find where the comments are. And let's see. I know there's people watching, but I can't. This is so strange. I'm sorry. Every time. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, let's see. Sorry, I'm gonna try this again. Yeah, because I don't want to go on until we know that that we have proper audio that you could hear us okay. Okay, I think I go to a different place, and I think there are comments, but I can't see it. Oh, okay, good. Thank you. Nidhi said she could hear us clear. Jen from Denmark said loud and clear. Tia Bravery from Texas, thank you. Someone, yeah, I lost the comment, but okay, so where I'm supposed to see the comments, I still haven't figured out, but I'm looking at the comments at a different place. So anyway, guys, okay, thank you so much and for letting us know that you could hear. Okay, so before we and so Dr. Fabricius has been doing research in this field for like a decade, right? And his research funded by the NIH, which is a very prestigious federal agency. So we're talking about solid research work here. Dr. Fabricius, why should we care about the emotional security of the child? How does that matter to the child? I know it's a stupid question, but let's
no, it's the perfect question to start with.
Thank you.
Right? When children have good relationships with their parents, they develop a sense of emotional security. And that's really the foundation for them being able to achieve independence from their parents, to explore the social world, to explore the physical world, to go out into places like daycare, like school, the play groups, because they have this sense that if they feel threatened, the parents will be there. And you can see this in little babies, 1-year-olds or 2-year-olds, when they're in a new situation, they can just turn their head just briefly and check, and mom and dad are there, right? And as they get older, it's the sense of emotional security that if I need to reach out to them, I'll have that support. So it's tremendously important. And when things go wrong in the parent-child relationship or in the family relationships, children can develop a sense of insecurity. And that's basically worry that whether the parent will be there if I need them. And it's worry about whether my family will be able to work together for me. It's worry about whether anyone will listen to me when I need it. Okay? And so that's all psychology. That's thoughts and worries and emotions. But what we've discovered, in recent modern times, is that things are going on, as we call it, under the skin. And that means the child's physiological stress response system. And that's composed of very powerful hormones that the brain releases when we are under threat and we have to fight or flee, basically. And but if the child has a low grade sort of insecurity and worry about the responsiveness of the parents, that triggers that physiological stress system at a very low level, but it releases chronic low doses of stress hormones through the child's system. And those powerful hormones are designed to activate the body, put it in high gear. And then the system is designed to soak up those hormones when the threat is passed. If the child is in a chronic low-level stress state and worry about security, those hormones can interfere with normal bodily functions. It can interfere with growth, metabolism, interferes with the immune system, and makes the child more susceptible to infectious diseases, and makes it harder for that child to develop cognitively, to really think about things and to explore the world because of that worry. And we know from the public health literature that goes back to the 1960s that disturbed parent-child relationships and disturbed family relationships play out decades later into stress-related physical health problems, in addition to mental health problems like depression, anxiety, and aggressiveness. So,
Yeah. So I mean, from what I'm hearing here as well, I mean, I read your work as well, and you've done literature review where what you're saying now is that emotional security is not just this invisible things that we're talking about. It actually translate into physical condition in the child development, and the child will grow up with not just mental health but physical health issues, right?
yes.
Which is something that somehow it seemed like the system, the legislation, or even the support system out there don't seem to recognize. And that show how important it is, your work, your research into this, because this bring impact into the child, it's not just the short term but the long term impact of it. And I think you've done research, or you've done review in, I mean, this is a multiple field that is intercepting, right? You're looking at the attachment theory, you're looking at emotional security model, you're looking at child development impacts, right? You are smiling. I'm not sure.
You're doing a better job than I could in explaining it. So it's, yes, you're exactly right. I'm happy to hear you summarize it. It's right on. Yes.
Thank you. So so let's talk about your research. So you look at the parent-child relationship, and this was done over like a decade of work. Yeah, could you talk to us about that, please?
Yes, so well, there's two sources. One is a decade-long longitudinal study that was funded by the National Institutes of Health. And we recruited families when children were 12 years old and followed them till they were 22. And we conducted, in-depth interviews with the mother, the father, and the child, professionally done, high standards of reliability. And so we can draw a lot of information from that data set about the role that the child's relationship with the mother and the father each play in long-term mental and physical health. The other approach I've taken is to interview college students about their experiences with their divorced family, and also interview the mothers and the fathers of those college students. So in that kind of study, we can look at 18 to 20-year-olds and look back at what happened to them, use their reports and their parents' reports. And in the first longitudinal study I told you about, we're looking forward from age 12 up to 22. So we can look at it both ways, and that's important to do because you want to see consistent results with different methods. And we find substantial consistency.
Thank you. And I see a question in the chat room, you guys. Thank you so much. Please let us know whatever questions that you have. We're going to try to pick it up. I saw Atlanta asking about where you can find the study. We're going to post some information on that for you guys later. But yeah, please let us know whatever questions that you have. We're going to try to pick that up. Okay, so I think it's an important aspect about your study. It's so important to look to make sure that we are looking at causation. What is the difference between causation and correlation? You're smiling.
Perfect question, just perfect. So the question that's plagued research on parenting time after divorce has been exactly that. If you find that children with equal parenting time are doing better in terms of their health, is it because those families were special who decided to have equal parenting time? And so maybe it's the parents themselves rather than the amount of parenting time. Okay? So if children with equal parenting time are doing better in the long run, that's a correlation between the parenting time they have and their outcomes. And maybe that relationship is just due to the parents, not the time. If, on the other hand, parenting time does cause increases or decreases in parent-child relationships and the security of those, then we know that parenting time has a causal impact, and then we should design policy to encourage it. So we have taken several different approaches to trying to find out whether parenting time causes better parent-child relationships or whether, it's just a reflection of them. And in general, this is a question that all of social science, faces. And, we face it very seriously. And we use the methods that have been developed to address the question. So I always like to draw the analogy with the early research that was done on tobacco smoking and the question of whether the smoking caused the cancer or whether it was something about the people who chose to smoke, right? Well, to just get to the bottom line, every way we've looked at the question of causality versus causation has consistently pointed to causality, the role of parenting time in actually impacting the security of parent-child relationships. I don't know if you want me to go through all of the ways we've done it, but I'll point out a couple of ways. And the first one is.
Hold on, maybe just let me just make sure that it's clear for parents. So what we are talking about is, for example, anytime it rains, it happens that let's say, cook chicken. We wanted to know that is it the rain that caused me cook the chicken, or it just incidentally that there's that relationship. And that is so important is because we need to be able to understand, is it truly the parenting time that had the impact on the children, or it just incidentally, or maybe it's something else that causes coincidence of this relationship. And so it's so important, it's Dr. Fabricius' work is truly determined that there's a causation relationship, meaning this caused that. And so that's the reason it's so important for us to see this. So yeah, please do tell us, you said you were doing a few things, yes.
Yes, so the question, if the worry is that good parents choose to have equal parenting time, and that's why those children are doing better, all right? Well, the first thing you have to realize is that parents really don't have as much choice over the parenting time arrangements they have, unlike the choice they have to smoke cigarettes or not. So we know that there are many cases where fathers wanted more parenting time than they were granted. We also know that the children of divorce express wishes that they had more parenting time than they had. So for various reasons, mothers and fathers are not free in all cases to select the amount of parenting time. So there are very many good fathers, for example, and nowadays good mothers who have been denied equal parenting time for various reasons. So it's not that easy to select the amount of parenting time you have. So that's just one way we look at it. Another way is that we see what's called a dose-response relationship between parenting time and security of parent-child relationships. And that's a very important thing to find. That's what medical research often uses to establish the effectiveness of a drug or a treatment. So we see a very close relationship between step-by-step increases in the percentage of yearly parenting time and very closely related step-by-step increases in the security of the parent-child relationship, so that we see the dose-response relationship. We see the same relationship in low-conflict families as in high-conflict families, which is consistent with parenting time having a causal impact. We see the same relationship when we look at parenting time during infancy and toddlerhood. So again, it's consistent with the parenting time having a long-term impact on the parent-child relationship. We see the same thing in cases where the parents relocate, move away after divorce, either the mother moving away with the child or the father moving away without the child. We see the same negative impacts of the decreased parenting time after relocation and decreased security of parent-child relationships. And finally, we have a study that is being written up right now, which uses the most state-of-the-art methods of separating causality from causation. These are methods that statisticians have just developed in the last about 10 years. And we have been able to use those methods on our 10-year longitudinal data. And the results are very clear that if parenting time goes up or down in one year, it could go up for various reasons. It could go down for relocation or jobs, whatever. But from the ages of 12 to 22, if parenting time increases in 1 year, about a year and a half later, you see stronger father-child relationships. And if parenting time with the father goes down in 1 year, again, 1 to 2 years later, we see a decrease in the parent-child relationship. So it's I'm a careful researcher, and I try to be as confident as I can in what I'm testing. And I'm convinced, given the whole pattern of evidence, that parenting time does impact the security of not only the father-child relationship, but the mother-child relationship.
And so what you are proposing is essentially equal shared parenting, right? Does that, so when let's say one parent doesn't get a lot of time and now you advocate for that parent to get more parenting time so that it's equal, does that impact the relationship of the other parent with the child?
Mm-hmm. No, equal parenting time is related to the best mother-child relationships and father-child relationships on a comparable level to what we see in families that are not divorced. So as parenting time with the father increases from 0% to 50%, we see a strengthening of the father-child relationship and no harm to the mother-child relationship. And the same thing is true vice versa. So if the child is having, 0% time with mom up to 50% time with mom, we see a strengthening of the mother-child relationship and no decrease in the father-child relationship.
And this is why it's so important for the system, for the legislators to see this, to understand this, for judges to understand this, to advocate for this, and professionals out there, lawyers, therapists, and for you as parents, it's also important to stay in the fight to get your parenting time, because it is such an important factor in the emotional security of your child. And what I really appreciate and have so much respect for Dr. Fabricius is that not only he's doing research, but he's also a very strong advocate in the legislation arena. Could you please talk to us a little bit about the work that you have done and actually the outcome that you have been able to bring for parents, especially in Arizona, right?
Yes, let me just start by saying, I don't consider myself an advocate in the way that term is often used. I consider myself an educator, first a researcher, and then an educator in the sense of making people aware of the research. So when I started doing this research, it was really 20 years ago. And we had a mechanism in the Arizona legislature and courts it was a large committee that was designed to provide feedback on family law legislation. So I was a member of that committee on a volunteer basis. And as I did the research on parenting time, I would present it to the committee. So we were learning together. And initially, there was a lot of skepticism about equal parenting time. But as the data came in, especially the judges listened to it and were convinced. So by about 2008 to 2010, I knew that the family law judges in Arizona were seeing the benefits of equal parenting time, and many of them on their own were starting to encourage parents to do that. And so at that point, I felt confident enough in the pattern of the research to form a subcommittee to reform the entire Arizona child custody statutes. And we looked at all aspects of it, and we had everybody at the table who had something to contribute. And it resulted in really the first child custody statute that basically presumed equal parenting time unless there were strong arguments against it. And that went into law January 1st, 2013. We've since done an evaluation of the law by surveying the entire family law community in Arizona, judges, attorneys, mental health professionals, and the directors and staff of the county conciliation courts, which see most of the divorcing parents. And the law is seen as positive by all groups, and there's been no attempt to modify or change it since 2013. And when I send visitors from different countries and different states to talk to members of the Arizona family law community, they come back and say they're not only happy with it, but they're proud of it. So we now know that it actually does work.
That's
so
wonderful.
it's quite satisfying, actually.
That is so wonderful. And this is actually so important for parents. I wanted to point out, well, if you listen to what Dr. Fabricius just shared with us, it's so important for us to recognize that. And I understand, and I see when parents get so frustrated with the system because, there's this lack of awareness at all levels. And we want to change the system, but you look at how much work that was put in, like Dr. Fabricius talking about sharing the information over like nearly a decade of work. And so it's about changing the system. Is you have to be patient. You have to build relationship. And he talked about everyone sitting at the table. You have to bring everyone to the table. Not only we need data and information, but we need to help raising the awareness. We need to bring everyone to the table and be patient. So we are working to change the system. And I do understand you feeling frustrated, but really we do have to be patient. We can make the change, because if you get frustrated now and giving up, we're not going to be able to make that change. So, listen to this story. It's so inspiring, and really truly understand that it does take a lot of work. The system is a big, slow moving machine. So, to make change, we do have to take time. The other aspect of your research, we're talking about the emotional security model. One of the factors you talk about is parenting time, which we now see is so important. What is the other factor? I know there's another factor in that model when it comes to the parent-child emotional security.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that other factor is parent conflict.
Yeah.
And both are important. We always look at both in our research, and you have to address both of those in any proposed legislative reforms. Right? So minimal parenting time is harmful to the child's relationship with the parent that they're not seeing very often. By the same token, parent conflict is harmful to the child when they are exposed to it. And both of those things work through the same emotional security system. And so one's not more important than the other. And we know from lots of research that's gone on for years, research into parent conflict, we really understand that when the parents are fighting, it causes a certain particular type of emotional insecurity in the child. And that's worry that I'll be abandoned and that I won't be listened to, and also that I might be hurt or one of my parents might be hurt. And we have ways of measuring that specific type of worry and emotional insecurity. By the same token, but parenting time spent with the child, parenting time affects a different sort of side of emotional security. And that's the child's either security or worry that they are important to that parent, or that they matter to that parent. So especially for younger children, if there's a divorce or separation, and the child is suddenly now seeing one parent a lot less, the only way children have to understand that is that that parent doesn't want to see me. And that causes the worry that whether I'm important or whether I can count on that parent. So what we find is that both minimal parenting time and high levels of parent conflict lead to particular types of emotional insecurity, and both of those types of emotional insecurity impact the child's later health. So the message that has to be given to courts and legislators is that what you've been doing so far in trying to protect children from exposure to parent conflict is good and noble and well-intentioned. But to try to protect children from exposure to parent conflict by reducing the child's parenting time with one of the parents, that's a very blunt instrument. And that actually exposes the child to an additional type of emotional insecurity. So what you want to do, I think, as courts and legislators is to find ways to reduce the parent conflict while maintaining equal parenting time. Parent conflict naturally decreases after divorce. Every time anybody's ever looked at it, 3, 4, 5 years after the divorce, the level of conflict has gone down. In some cases, of course, it doesn't. But the courts have better ways of addressing parent conflict than by sort of removing one parent from the child's life. And I think it's just very important to make to educate, people that, both of these things work through the child's emotional insecurity and both play out in physical health problems later on, which means that this is a public health issue that has, you know, consequences for individuals' happiness and pain and suffering, but also for society's, you know, cost of public health issues. So I think it's a very coherent, very strong argument, but you have to help people understand how these systems work, and especially how the child can misinterpret, you know, standard every other weekend visitation. The child is left worrying about whether that parent really wants to see me and whether they will come back. And it's especially happens the younger the child is.
Yeah, this is definitely a very big public health problem because the problem is widespread and it has serious consequences. And like you said, the impact is on the individuals. It's impacting society. There's a society cost in public health, but also the ability of contribution. This massive number of individuals can contribute to society later on in life as well. So really, it's a huge public health problem, but yet there's not enough recognition, and that's why it's so important. Your work is so important. But for parents, I wanted to kind of re-emphasize what Dr. Fabricius has just been covered, at least a few things that he covered, which is talking about the mattering issue. You know, it's so important for your child to understand that they matter to you. So as parents, that's a very important aspect of this, is with the time that you fighting for your parenting time and with the time that you have, ensuring that the child understand that the child matter to you, because that's the important aspect here of the model that he found. Is that right, Dr. Fabricius?
Yes, yes. I think now, with what we understand, parents can legitimately request equal parenting time in all of these cases and be putting that before courts with the evidence behind it. It's especially important in high conflict families. This is very counterintuitive. Courts and mental health professionals have been thinking for years that if there's higher conflict, then there should be less shared parenting. But the research shows exactly the opposite. Even in high conflict families, more parenting time with dad, and those are the large, we really can't measure, you know, father custody families and parenting time with mom because there just aren't enough people that we can, you know, reliably obsess with our statistics. So we always look at the father parenting time. So to go back, even in a high conflict family, more parenting time with father is related to stronger father-child relationships. And it's also related to less insecurity about the conflict itself. This is a finding that several people have found. And what we think is happening there is that if the parents are engaged in, you know, a lot of conflict around the time of the divorce and for a little while after it, if the child has two homes, equal parenting time, that in itself is a source of security that the conflict is not going to drive one of them away, because both of them are here, they're both providing a home for me, they're fighting, but children worry less about the conflict in equal parenting time arrangements. So we see lots of reasons why parents should be making the case for equal parenting time. Of course, you have to live close. You can't have equal parenting time if you're living far away from the child. So there are accommodations that need to be made in terms of parents' lives after the divorce. And especially with fathers who move away from their children. They shouldn't do that. Guys, come on.
Yeah, and I wanted to point out, even though Dr. Fabricius work sort of focus more on the father, but we are not trying to say, we're not trying to be in any way sort of biased in terms of gender. This issue applies to both mothers and fathers, and really it's there's no difference. it can happen to both father and mothers. We see that in real life. We see that in legal system. So anyway, the other aspect that he also mentioned, which is so important, is how parental conflicts have an impact on the child emotional security. So as parents, it's so important for you to recognize this and to shelter the best you can the child from that conflict, because sometimes parents, you may not, and it's a natural reaction, you may not be aware of this. So you sometimes inadvertently keeping the child in the middle of the conflict by saying, oh, your father, why would he say this? And why your mother, why did, don't do that. So be aware that the parental conflict has this impact on your child, and try your best. Maybe the other party doesn't, but when you can, you yourself have to try to shelter your child from that conflict. And then could you talk about the parent responsiveness, which is also another factor here, and what that is about?
Parent responsiveness to the child's wants and needs is a very important, component of that child developing security in that relationship. We've known that for a long time. That's what researchers look at in terms of parents and infants. Is the parent responding to the infant's signals? Right? We can all imagine. I always tell my class that the best, sort of one of the great examples of that is diaper changing. Diaper changing is an incredible opportunity to be responsive to your child, right? But it's also, it can be a time when the parent decides that I'm going to do this on my schedule, and because, it's not very fun for me, and the child might want to play, the child might be, sleepy or whatever. But, when you think about diaper changing, you can think either the parent goes in doing it on their schedule, regardless of signals from the infant, or you can respond to those signals, and they can be different each time. So responsiveness is one of the things that builds up emotional security in the child. We have actually interviewed 400 adolescents, starting at age 12, and we interviewed them again at age 14 and a half. And we asked the adolescents to just talk about their relationship with mom and their relationship with dad. In some cases, they had a stepdad, so we asked about that. And in what they said, there was so much consistency in what they said. They talked essentially about three things in each of these relationships. One was how responsive their parent was to their wants and needs. Things like, when I need help with homework, do they help me? Or when I, want something. But a second one was just the sort of emotional quality of the relationship. So whether there's warmth and love and humor versus anger and, short-tempered and coldness. But the third one, which we were very surprised about, especially surprised that adolescents would talk about this, was how much time their parents spent with them. They would say things like, well, I hardly ever see her, or he does a lot with us. And so they were talking about three aspects of parent-child relationships that go all the way back to infancy: how responsive the parent is, how warm and close and happy the relationship is, and the time spent together. So this is one of the things that convinced us of the importance of time together, because even adolescents are evaluating that. And what that means to them is, do I matter to this parent, right? And so all three of those things are important. And of course, the time spent together is what translates into custody policy, something that policymakers can have some impact on to avoid doing harm.
So Dr. Fabricius just talked about parent responsiveness. So what it is about responding to your child when your child is happy or sad, that you have the appropriate response. So the child feels like that they matter to you,
Mhm.
that you care, that you so for parents, having the parenting time, this is so important, because when you do have your child, you wanted to be there for them instead of being on your phone, being, a lot of the time you don't appreciate and you don't take advantage of the time that you do have. And especially today, the modern society, we have so many distractions in our life. And so it's so important for you to recognize the responsiveness, the factor on your child, your and your child's relationship is when you do have time with your child, make sure that it's quality time, focusing on improving this quality time by, eye contact, physical contact, by using words that are, supportive, that are loving, things like that, having hugs, bonding activities, things like that. Make sure that you're improving your parent responsiveness so that you can improve the quality of your time with your children. Now, a lot of you don't have contact with your children, like you don't have the parenting time with your children. Then make sure you try to improve your best, the responsiveness, maybe through text messages, through other ways of social media contact, in a way that you can somehow improve this responsiveness the best you can. I know it's challenging when you don't have the parenting time. So we talk, Dr. Fabricius, we talk about parenting time being a huge factor here. We talk about the parent responsiveness being also a very important factor. We talk about parent conflict being a huge factor in the child emotional security model, and how that impacts the child's well-being and health and well-being later on in life, and the child development even at younger age. Could you talk a little bit about domestic violence?
Yes, we have looked at that recently, and what we find is pretty much the same pattern that we find when we just ask about parent conflict, that not necessarily violent. But we get mothers and fathers to report on the incidences of domestic violence that happened in the past. And what we see is that just like for parent conflict, that it has a harmful effect on the child's emotional security. And it tends to increase the child's emotional insecurity about having witnessed domestic violence tends to increase as parenting time increases up to about 30 or 35%. But then what we see is the same thing, that at equal parenting time, the child is showing less insecurity about the amount, about the parent, about the domestic violence that they witnessed. So we think that, witnessing domestic violence has the same kind of impact on the child's emotional insecurity as, being exposed to nonviolent parent conflict. And kind of surprisingly, in both cases, it seems like equal parenting time is a way to buffer the child's insecurity about parents who've been in conflict or have had some instances of domestic violence in the past. Now, of course, when we look at domestic violence in our big longitudinal data set, there are, of course, some cases, a few cases with really extreme levels of violence. So I really can't talk about, what level of domestic violence that is, a game changer. But we look at cases where where the child reports there and the parents report there have been some instances of it, either perpetrated by the mother or by the father. And we again see beneficial effects associated with equal parenting time, even in those families that had a history of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So what you're saying is that unless if the situation of extreme domestic violence that put the child at risk, if there was domestic violence in the situation, you see similar correlation in terms of the improving emotional security on the child when we're talking about parenting time, both for the presence of some domestic violence and no domestic violence.
Mhm. Yes, especially with equal parenting time. We don't know exactly what that means to the child, but you can imagine that probably the child gets the message that even if mom or dad had been instigating some domestic violence in the past, that they're still a good parent because I'm with them half the time. Children read so much into the time that they have with the parent that we just keep seeing benefits associated with equal parenting time.
Thank you. I'm going to actually, yeah, before I go into the question and parents, like I said, make sure you post your questions. Dr. Fabricius does have to leave soon, so we can't have a very long interview. So if you have a question, please post it now. I'm going to try to pick the question. Are there any other things that I should have asked you? Anything else about the model, any other things that you think is really important to highlight here?
I guess about parenting time during infancy and toddlerhood. That is a huge question. I have been involved with the debates at policy levels about it and the research on it. I've just finished writing a chapter for an Oxford Handbook of Family and Child Law about parenting time during infancy and toddlerhood. And we have done a study on that. And it is a very good study. I can say that because part of my job is evaluating research and reviewing research for journals. And basically what we find is that the amount of overnight parenting time that the child had during the first year from birth to 1 year of age, and also from 1 to 2, and then 2 to 3, has a strong connection with long-term parent-child relationships, even when you control for the amount of parenting time they had in childhood and adolescence. So it seems to be especially important to have equal overnight parenting time during their child's earliest years, because that's when the attachments form. That's when parents learn how to be a parent to that child. That's when parents learn about this child as an individual. And we see that. We see the effect, the impact of those, a number of overnights during the first 3 years, over and above the parenting time they had later. And again, the benefits of equal parenting time were the same in high conflict families and low conflict families, more educated parents versus less educated parents. And the most important thing was that we were able to ask the parents, did you choose to have equal numbers of overnights during the child's first few years, or did the court impose it in one way or the other? And we find the benefits even when the court imposed more overnight parenting time over the mother's objections. And other studies have found that too, that when parents do go to court and the court does impose more parenting time than they would have, you see benefits to the child. Typically, parents who do go to court are more likely to get more parenting time. And when the courts impose it, we see the benefits. So that's another piece of evidence that it's not just the good parents selecting to have more parenting time.
This is why it's so important, and we say this a lot to parents, especially when you have younger children. It's so important for you to not give up the fight. It's so important to be there for your children, and a lot of the time, sometimes parents think, well, they're too young. Maybe it doesn't matter. I'll wait until they grow up a bit bigger, and then they will understand, and I'll rebuild that relationship. But this is why it's so important to recognize the early childhood experience, how that impacts your relationship and how it impacts your child well-being later on in life. This has a very long-term impact. I thought it was another interesting thing was that you proposed something about because especially in terms of a high conflict situation, how do you there's a proposal that you put about how do you minimize this conflict impact and still ensuring parenting time? I'm not sure if I'm making sense here. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, I know in Arizona and in other states, parents can be required to go to parent education classes or to mediation or to having something like a parent coordinator, various ways that the message can get to parents that you need to stop fighting between each other, lower the conflict, because that's going to be better for your child and better for your long-term relationship with your child. So I think the kinds of things that you were saying before about being aware of when you're in conflict and being aware that the child is listening, be aware of the things you say. And I think that parents need to be educated and in cases get therapy and get help for how to reduce that. It's very important.
Right. So for parents, being well-informed, well-educated is so important. And that is why it's so good that you guys are here watching, because you are one of those parents that really can. You wanted to learn, you want to be better parents, and you're not giving up hope. And that's so important. And I really admire you guys for being here. And the other things that I think you talk about in some of your papers is that when there's a lot of conflict and you wanted to minimize the parental conflict, is by minimizing that chance of interaction. So you could structure the parenting time while you're still ensuring equal shared parenting time is by having sort of a longer block of times, right? So reducing the number of exchange. So instead of having exchanging every day or something, then it increasing the interaction of the parents. You may try to still ensuring equal parenting time, but minimizing parenting interaction by having just block of that, right?
Yeah, that's a very good strategy. Yes.
Thank you.
But also being careful of what you say when the child is with you. As you said before, little comments that denigrate the other parent are harmful to the child. So
Right.
get over your own hurt and pain and realize your child is feeling equal, if not more, hurt and pain, and put the child first.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing about parental alienation. It's the children that are the true victims. You feel really hurt, you're really in pain, but your children are the true victims here. I'm gonna try to go through the comments and questions and see what we can get. I know that some of the questions and comments I can't get to, but okay. Alicia said they hear and feel everything. Yeah, definitely. Claudia said, I've had to relearn their love language by discovering their interests. Yeah, this is the thing. When you have good access to your children, before your divorce, sometimes parents will take things for granted. You may not pay attention to your children. You may not, you just kind of like, you love your children the way you love your children, instead of loving your children the way that your children need to be loved. So I think this is so important. Do you want to comment? I saw you smile, so
you express it so well. It's I'm learning from you. That's very, very, very well put and very true.
Thank you. You're too nice. Thank you.
Divorce and separation can, I think, it can be an opportunity to have a better relationship with your child and an independent relationship with your child. In some ways, children can get to know their mothers and fathers better as individuals when they have separate homes than when they were together. I'm not advocating divorce, but look for opportunities and Yeah, always be thinking about your child.
Right. Um, Noel agree with Alicia that yes, the children do hear and feel everything. Sabrina said, so to sum it up, the child needs both parents who are grown up enough to put their child first. Yeah, that's a good sum up, Sabrina. Um, Someone said, oh, it scrolls so fast. Oh, this comment, I'm sorry, I might miss some. Someone said, this is an opportunity to go deeper and do better. Yes, so this is a silver lining in the divorce, is this is your opportunity to reevaluate and relearn your skill as parents and go deeper, and things will never go back to the way they were, but it can be a lot better. And it's up to you to do this now. Um, okay. I'm trying to figure out how I can see the comment. This is so frustrating. I apologize. How do I scroll? This I know there's so many comments and yet I can't scroll it. I'm sorry.
Do we have any fathers there?
There's a lot of fathers. Are there fathers in the room? I know we have a lot of fathers in the comments. Yeah, can you tell us a little bit why is your research focused on father instead of mothers? I mean, other
Well,
than the fact that you're probably working on yourself, your personal interest.
no, we measure the father-child relationship and the mother-child relationship always. But when we talk about parenting time, there's just not enough cases where the father has the primary home and the mother has less visiting time. So they're just smaller numbers. And so you really can't draw very strong conclusions. But when we do look at it, we see exactly the same processes happening. And I
Yes.
know I testify occasionally you know, in court cases, and I've had cases where the mother is trying to get equal parenting time because the father has been able to deny her time, and it's the same thing that I say in both cases, and it really is clear though that the courts can make it difficult for mothers to get equal parenting time if the father is able to, do certain things.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice? I see that a few things and yeah, I definitely see father, like Paul in the chat room said, yes, I'm here, I'm a father. Do you have advice for parents that have to deal with false allegation? Because false allegation of abuse is a pretty effective tool when it comes to parental alienation.
I know. I think that the only way to deal with that is to have legislative change that recognizes that parenting time is just as important to as dealing with parent conflict or allegations of abuse or child neglect or whatever. Yeah, courts should look into those separately, but in the meantime, don't deal with them by removing one parent. I know in Arizona, when we were revising our statutes, we put in sanctions both for false allegations and false denials. And that sends a message, I think, to both parents that you need to be truthful about this. We haven't seen any sort of large increase in allegations of violence or abuse. We've seen a small uptick, which which actually kind of indicates that a law presuming equal parenting time doesn't stifle allegations. So it looks like parents aren't afraid to bring them, or that they feel that they won't be listened to. So we neither see a decrease in them after the law was passed, or there's a slight increase, but not a substantial one.
There's a question in the chat room about is there a way for parents to sign up to be a part of your study?
No, unfortunately.
Okay,
We might in the future. I'm talking with people in the Nordic countries, in Denmark and Norway, about replicating some of our findings there, and we might do that over the over social media. There are various platforms where people can volunteer for research there, but we don't know for sure. But,
thank you. Tyler asks, how do you de-escalate the child's anger and hatred?
Well, try to find out what's causing it, I suppose. Is the child mad at you? Ask the child to talk. If the child's angry, talk, listen, don't be defensive. Anger is a plea for communication.
Yeah, don't take the bait. Don't react to that's the thing when it comes to parental alienation. The other parent had portrayed you as this dangerous, unsafe, unloving, not available parent. So when you are truly a loving parent, you want this good relationship with your child, don't take the bait when your child acts this way, because your child have been programmed and brainwashed in acting this way. So really don't react to your child behavior with defensiveness and aggression and things like that, because then you're going to confirm the alienator's false narrative. Really, it's really important to take yourself out of that and then from there rebuild that relationship with your children. We'll have a lot of this conversation in other interviews as well, especially with the interview with Dr. Amy Baker. So check out our videos that when we interview her. Okay. Nigel said professionals appointed from the court, for example, guardians ad litem, should be determining the cause of this. What is the cause of what? Are you talking about domestic violence, I assume? And yes, if that's the case, there's, I think that's a very huge topic, and I wanted to explore this because it's such a false allegation of abuse is such an effective tool, unfortunately, for alienators to take the children away from parents. And I really want to explore how do you fight false allegation, and in a separate conversation later. I know the time is up, is running out, so we're gonna have to go. But do you have any last thoughts of wisdom for parents? Anything else that we should add before you go? I know I can't hold you too long.
No, not at all. I think we've pretty much covered what I've been able to learn about this. I think you're doing a great job with practical strategies for parents who are caught in these situations. I've enjoyed hearing you talk about that. I think that parents can be reassured that they should ask for equal parenting time, and they should try to educate the courts and the policymakers. I know in Arizona, I talked about the committee that we had formed, and I talked about me presenting the research as it was developing. But the other side of that was a dad. His name was Mike Espinoza, and he went to his state senator with his story of how he was being cut out of his children's lives, and he was able to get her ear, and she was determined to drop a bill that would presume joint legal custody. And so his story and his relationship with the state senator was a real motivating force behind my committee, getting into high gear and getting language together and coming to a comprehensive bill. So, it's both things. It's talking, going to your state legislators. Try to find someone in your in your local university who's a child developmental psychologist or a family psychologist. They know my field knows that fathers are important and just as important as mother-child relationships, but very few of us go out into the real world and try to educate, family law communities. But approach people in your locale who can do that, who can, be available for questions and advice, and go and talk to legislators and talk to committee hearings. We're putting, we just started now to put all of this research and all of these findings together into a book that could basically be a handbook for, the importance of equal parenting time in relation to parent conflict, and the various research on different aspects of it, like relocation and time with infants and toddlers. So just be encouraged that the research is there. And it basically, we also know that the public opinion is behind it. That was the other thing we didn't talk about. We did large public opinion studies in Arizona and found that this is the issue that crosses all lines. Democrat, Republican, male, female, divorced, intact, high income, low income. We found no factor that differentiated people in their agreement that children should have equal time with both parents after divorce. So the culture is there. And the research is there. And it all is completely intuitive and is what we all know already. So be brave.
So what else is still the question? What is the next big question in your mind about any
Well,
of
it's how to change the policy. And as you said in the beginning, policy is hard to change because, people aren't aware of all the facts. Some of the information is new. They haven't gone to graduate school or law school for decades. They don't know the modern statistics. And what they've been doing in the past is, it's hard to change because you have to admit that maybe what you were doing in the past wasn't the best. So you have to not threaten people. You have to get people on board. The one thing we did in Arizona was we agreed to modernize both the parenting time language and the domestic violence language in the bill. And so that was one way we got everybody together because, the domestic violence language in this child custody statute needed to be modernized away from just physical violence towards more emotional and controlling kinds of violence. So build bridges, realize that it's the child and all of these things are happening through the child's physiological system. That really makes it clear that what's in the best interest of the child is, having this sense of emotional security for their long-term health. And, you're right in wanting equal parenting time. So be brave in asking for it. Sure.
Thank you so much. I know you have to go. I'm so grateful for this conversation. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. I know Dr. Fabricius has to go. I'm going to stay on a little bit and see if I can catch some of your questions the best I can. And then for any questions that are sort of critical, maybe we can send it to Dr. Fabricius to get his comment later on. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Petra.
Thank you. And parents, so you go ahead, you can leave. I know you have the next meeting. I'm just gonna stay on and make sure that I see if I can catch more question with parents. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah. So parents, okay, so Dr. Fabricius talked quite a bit about legislation and advocating for change. So this week or maybe early next week, we need to pick a time, but we're gonna have a Zoom call to talk to parents about how you can change the legislation, how you can participate in this. We wanted to share with you guys, this is going to be a private Zoom conversation. It's not going to be a live stream event because we wanted this to be a discussion. We want you to be at the table and bring your question and your ideas. But we wanted to share, and we're going to bring some advocates with us to share what they have done, their experiences in how to change the law in their states. So if you are interested in this, make sure you join our mailing list on VictimToHero.com website, because we're going to send out an email just to invite you to join the Zoom call. We're going to, like I said, it's going to be sometime this week or early next week. Now, I'm going to try my best to look at the questions that you have and see if I can answer any of those, or if there's something critical, I'm going to send to Dr. Fabricius to see, to get his comments on it. And thank you so much, you guys, for being here. Really appreciate you. Really appreciate your support as always. Okay, so let's see the questions that I can see. Okay, Crystal said, fathers are getting more time. It's starting to turn around now. The father took my time. Yeah, Crystal, I agree. I think traditionally the system have been biased. There's a gender bias in the system. So usually mothers sort of almost automatically get more time, but things are changing now. So that's why we've been saying this is not a gender issue. It happens to both mothers and fathers. And yeah, a lot of the time mothers lose the parenting time, and for the wrong reason. We have a lot of cases of false allegations. We've seen it. I am a mother, and it happened to me, and I had to fight that. So it can happen to both genders. We're not trying to be gender biased in any way. Noel said, thank you. Thank you so much, Noel, for being here, for your support. I've seen you at multiple of our events. Really appreciate that. And thank you, parents. Please, if any of this resonates with you, please like the video. Please help sharing it so that more people can see this. Facebook has this algorithm that, the more interaction we have, it will help bringing this more exposure. We're also going to upload this video to YouTube. So, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can search for it. It's under Victim2Hero. Thank you. Okay, Nigel said, I know false allegation can ruin your health as well as your child's life. False allegation can destroy lives. It can literally destroy lives. We've seen parents that kill themselves. We've seen parents that got killed because of false allegation. It get to the extreme. We've seen children that getting killed because of false allegation. And we've seen everything in between, the impact of false allegation on the situation. And this is the thing. It bothered me a lot, and I've been thinking a lot, because this is such an effective tool for alienators. So I think a very important aspect of this is for us to figure out, how do we fight false allegation? So here's my ask for you guys. Now, if any of you have successfully fought false allegation in court, could you please reach out to me? Because I want to talk to you and I want to hear how you fight it. If you know of lawyers who are really good at fighting false allegation in court, could you please let me know as well? You can message us on Victim2Hero Facebook page, and let me know. If you did not fight, you were not successful in fighting for false allegation, but yet you have clear and convincing evidence of false allegation, could you please also let me know? So the next thing I really wanted to kind of take a look at is, how do we fight false allegation? Because this has always been the situation. And I see that as such a big roadblock, because as soon as there's false allegation of abuse, it take everybody back, because then suddenly, teachers, therapists, lawyer, judges, everyone suddenly kind of step back and go, well, we don't know if this is true or false, but we're going to be trying to be safe. We're going to play safe by just taking the child away from that parent that was being accused. And suddenly now nobody is really paying attention to everything else that we're talking about today, the child emotional security and all that. And so now suddenly, instead of what it should be the case, which is until proven, you're not guilty until proven. And yet now, when in case of false allegation, it becomes that you are guilty until you can prove that you are not guilty. And that's, the system is like upside down in that way. And that really bothered me. So we definitely have to think about this. Okay, Sabrina said, I have overcome vicious, awful false allegation, which lead me to almost dying of heart failure. I'm happy to share. Sabrina, please reach out to me. I want to talk to you. Thank you so much. We got Tyler said, I've been out of court for over 11 years. And we will see going forward. Who knows? But I hope I don't have to go back to court. Courts is such a painful experience, and a lot of parents have to go in and out of courts and it get dragged out for many years, and it drain you financially, it drain you emotionally, it drain you physically, it destroy your relationship with your children, it destroy your relationship with yourself, it destroy your relationship with other people. It's a horrible situation to be in. Let's see, what else do I have? Claudia said, Google, who represents me? Okay, so this is talking about legislation. If you wanted to participate, if you wanted to make your voice heard, politicians are there to represent you. So you and they do want to hear from the constituents. They wanted to make sure that the constituents are happy. So you can make your voice heard by reaching out to the politicians who represent you. So everyone, doesn't matter where you are, there are politicians that represent you. So you can Google who represents me. And in the US, for every state, you should have your House representative, you should have your state senators that represent your district based on where you are, and you should have someone in the Congress level that represent you, and you should be able to find that information. And then they will always have some way for you to reach out to them. So contact them, share your story, try to be less drama and focusing on what matters, because you want to hear you want your stories to be heard. You want them to see that is not you that is the problem. You want them to see the problem in itself, of whatever the situation is. But yeah, do reach out and speak to people. But anyway, like I said, we're going to have a Zoom call coming up, either later this week or early next week, to talk specifically about this. How can you participate in reshaping the system? We need to change the law. We need the politicians to hear us. We need the legislators, the policymakers to hear and see the problem. Hatcher said the system is built upon division. Majority are only now seeing it as it's being done to everyone of current, I feel. Yeah, public awareness takes time. The system change takes time. And sometimes it seems so frustrating because you don't see the change, but slowly it does change. And it's important for us to not give up. Crystal says, sign me up, please. Yeah, Crystal, please go to our website, VictimToHero.com, and you can sign up to our mailing list. I think it's at the top right of the website. You can sign up to our mailing list, and then that way you can get our emails. I know we don't send out a lot of emails, which is a good thing. You're not going to be spammed. We're not going to sell your information. We're not going to spam you. We actually don't send enough emails, which I'm going to try to change that. But we're going to send out information on how you can join the Zoom call, because that way we want you to participate in that conversation. We're going to talk about how we can change the system. Paul said defamation is a criminal offense in Greece. Well, in the US, what is the term? Well, defamation is something that you can fight, as well as, I'm going blank right now, when you can prove that the other person lied in order to benefit. What is the term for that? I'm sorry, I'm going blank right now. I'm a little bit tired today, but there's a term for it. It's a criminal offense. So if you can prove that the other person falsely accused you in order to benefit. And when it's a criminal offense, it's something that you don't have to fight against them in the civil. You can, if you want to, you can go through the civil route, which is suing them for damages. But you can also get the district attorney office to fight for you because it's a criminal matter. So it's up to the state, to the government, the state and the federal government to fight for you as a victim. I'll figure out that word later. I'm sorry, I just can't think of it right now. Tia said, thank you for organizing. I have lost parenting time for treating my children with holistic medicine. Yeah, this is the thing, right? When you're in the good relationship with the alienators, you know, when you're still married, right? The alienator marry you or have a relationship with you for who you are, supposedly, right? So when, like, if you didn't break up, then it's fine. Like whatever you do is fine. Like the holistic treatment, know that was considered okay, or sometimes even considered a good thing. And then suddenly, when it comes to custody battle, suddenly everything about you is being used against you, and suddenly now it's being seen as a bad thing, and it's just terrible. So she said, my shared parenting contracts say, although there is no evidence of abuse or neglect, circumstances have changed since the divorce. I don't know how to get 50-50 back after that. I don't understand why they were able to remove my kids from 50-50 without any abuse or neglect. Yeah, so I don't understand your case specifically. I don't know enough to comment, and I'm also not a lawyer. But one of the aspect of fighting to change the custody, one of the requirement for going back to court is that there have to be a circumstances, have to be a substantial change in the circumstances. And so what I can see from what you wrote there, what I could gather, is that it seemed like the other parents have been able to claim to the court that there have been a substantial change in the circumstances, and therefore it warrant